You've been lied to your entire life. They told you if you just worked harder, sacrificed more sleep, pushed through more pain, you'd finally be respected, finally be safe, finally be enough. But look around. The offices are filled with exhausted people who gave their best years to a company that will replace them in a week. The schools are filled with students burning themselves out for grades that won't guarantee them a future. Entire generations are collapsing under the weight of hard work, yet somehow still feel invisible, disposable, and powerless. Here's the bitter truth. Society doesn't actually reward the hardest worker. Society uses him, the man who is always available, always grinding, always saying yes. He's not admired. He's consumed. He becomes a cog, forgotten the moment he wears down. But the man who refuses this game, the one who seems lazy, who withholds his effort, who doesn't rush to prove himself, he is the one people secretly fear, because he cannot be controlled. He doesn't run himself into the ground just to earn a pat on the back. He chooses when to act, and when he does, his impact is 10 times greater than the frantic worker who spent years exhausting himself. Carl Jung saw this coming. He warned that modern man drowns himself in endless activity, mistaking busyness for meaning. He called it a form of collective possession, a herd mentality where people confuse constant motion with real purpose. The one who steps outside of this madness, who says, "No, I won't waste my life on empty effort," this man becomes dangerous because his very existence exposes how fragile the system of endless work really is. And that's the paradox. What looks like laziness on the surface is often deep strategy underneath. Society hates this figure, not because he is weak, but because he reveals the uncomfortable truth. The people who move the world are rarely the ones exhausting themselves. They are the ones who know when to be still, when to hold back, and when to strike. Think about the people you know who work the hardest. The janitor who cleans the building long after everyone's gone. The delivery driver who barely sleeps just to keep food on the table. The employee who never leaves the office before midnight. Now ask yourself, are these the people society celebrates? Are these the faces you see on magazine covers, in positions of power, or commanding respect? No, because hard work alone has never been the path to freedom. It's been the path to obedience. This is the cruel trick you were taught. If you grind yourself into the ground, if you never stop proving your worth, eventually society will reward you. But the truth is, hard work often creates the perfect servant, the man too busy, too tired, too drained to ever step back and ask, "Why am I doing this?" Carl Jung warned about this trap when he spoke of people losing themselves to the collective. You become possessed by society's expectations, by the pressure to always move, always do, always sacrifice. You tell yourself it's noble, but in reality, you've surrendered your individuality. You're just another cog spinning in a machine that will never thank you. History proves this again and again. The richest kings weren't the ones fighting in the mud. They sent others to fight for them. The corporate leaders making millions aren't the ones answering late-night emails. That's the worker's burden. The empire is built not on the brilliance of hard workers, but on their exhaustion. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Working harder doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you replaceable, because there will always be someone younger, hungrier, more desperate, willing to work harder than you. And when they show up, all your years of sacrifice collapse into silence. You're forgotten. But the strategically lazy man, he terrifies people, not because he does nothing, but because he does only what matters. He doesn't confuse motion with progress. He waits, He watches. He learns where the leverage is. He strikes once, and it counts. That's why society labels him lazy. It's not laziness. It's rebellion. It's a refusal to play the game on the system's terms. He doesn't burn himself out chasing approval. He uses his energy sparingly, like a blade reserved for the right moment. And when he moves, people notice, because unlike the endless grind of the worker, his actions have weight. This is the myth unraveling. Society wants you to believe that worth is measured in sweat, in hours, in exhaustion. But deep down, you already know that's a lie. If effort alone guaranteed respect, the hardest workers would be kings. Instead, they are invisible. Jung's insight cuts deeper here. The man who doesn't bow to this illusion becomes an individual, and individuality, in a world built on conformity, is threatening. That's why the lazy strategist is feared, because he exposes the truth nobody wants to face. Most of our hard work is not freedom, it's slavery dressed up as virtue. Have you ever noticed how drained you feel after forcing yourself to do things that don't actually matter? That exhaustion you carry home every night. It's not just physical. Carl Jung believed it was psychic. He argued that our mind runs on a limited supply of psychic energy, the raw fuel that powers thought, emotion, and creativity. And just like a candle, once it's burned, it's gone. Now think about where most people spend that fuel. Pointless emails, repetitive tasks, endless small talk, chasing approval. Day after day, they pour their life force into obligations that leave nothing behind. They confuse motion with meaning. They work harder, but inside, they become emptier. This is where the so-called lazy man becomes terrifying, because unlike the obedient worker, he refuses to waste his energy on what doesn't matter. He conserves it, guards it, and waits for the right moment to use it. His laziness is not weakness, it's discipline. Jung saw this as the deeper battle of modern life. Whether you scatter your psychic energy into the collective, or you protect it for your own path of individuation. Most people leak their energy into the collective hive mind, scrolling, hustling, reacting to everything. The lazy man resists. He looks unbothered, detached, even arrogant. But in reality, he's storing up strength. And when he finally acts, his energy is so focused, it cuts through everything like a blade. This is why ancient myths often praise the figure of the still, patient strategist. The hermit in the cave who withdraws from society isn't wasting time, he's charging power. The trickster who seems idle and playful is secretly waiting for the perfect opening. These figures terrified people precisely because they weren't running in circles like everyone else. They couldn't be exhausted, manipulated, or drained. Society brands this man lazy because they don't understand him, and because they can't control him. A man who works himself into the ground is predictable. He'll always be too tired to resist. But a man who saves his energy, that man is dangerous. He can't be bent into the system because he doesn't give the system his fuel. He gives it only to what matters to him. And here's the part that should sting. Most people aren't afraid of being exhausted. They're afraid of being seen as lazy. So they keep throwing away their energy just to appear hardworking, even as their inner self withers away. The so-called lazy man exposes this lie. He proves that the bravest thing you can do in a world of endless motion is to stop wasting yourself. Society isn't afraid of the man who works himself to death. He's safe. He's predictable. He'll wake up tomorrow, clock in, grind until he collapses, and then be replaced by the next man willing to do the same. There's no threat in him, only obedience. But the man who refuses to play that game, the one who withholds his effort, who only moves when it matters, that man terrifies people. They call him lazy, arrogant, even immoral. Why? Because he breaks the one illusion society depends on, that constant busyness equals virtue. Think about it. If everyone suddenly realized they didn't have to burn themselves out to be valuable, entire industries would collapse overnight. Companies rely on workers who confuse exhaustion with meaning. Schools reward students who never stop producing, not the ones who question the point of the work. Even families praise the child who keeps themselves endlessly occupied while quietly fearing the one who sits in silence, watching, thinking. The strategically lazy man threatens all of this because he sees through it. He knows the game. And when someone knows the game, they can't be controlled by it. History is full of people like this. Think of philosophers who seemed idle but changed the world with a single book. Think of inventors who were mocked for doing nothing until their one focused act shifted history. Even prophets and visionaries were often seen as strange, unproductive loners before their insights shattered the collective illusion. What looked like laziness was actually the power of restraint, the refusal to waste energy on what wasn't essential. To the collective, this restraint looks dangerous, because it is. A man who isn't constantly busy can't be trapped in the hamster wheel. He has time to think. He has time to observe. He has time to choose. And choice is what makes him powerful. That's why society reacts with fear. The strategically lazy man forces everyone else to confront their own slavery to busyness. He reveals that most of what they do is meaningless, rituals of exhaustion that keep them from facing their emptiness. His very existence feels like an accusation. He doesn't even have to say anything. His calm refusal to rush exposes how desperate everyone else really is. So they attack him. They mock him. They shame him with words like unmotivated, good for nothing, lazy. But behind that judgment is jealousy. Because deep down, people know he has what they lack: control. He owns his energy. He spends it where it matters. They don't. This is why Jung's ideas cut so deep. He warned that when you abandon yourself to the collective, you become replaceable. The strategically lazy man is the opposite. He doesn't burn his candle for the world's approval. He guards his flame until it lights his own path. And that's exactly what makes him so dangerous to a society built on conformity. The fear isn't that he does nothing. The fear is that he does only what matters. And in a world drowning in noise, that kind of focus is revolutionary. So let's be clear. When we talk about the strategically lazy man, we're not glorifying sloth or aimless idleness. This isn't about lying in bed all day scrolling your phone. That's not strategy. That's surrender. What makes him dangerous isn't his refusal to work. It's his refusal to work meaninglessly. Carl Jung believed that modern man suffers from what he called a loss of soul. We drown ourselves in tasks, jobs, distractions, and endless busyness to avoid the uncomfortable truth. We don't really know who we are. The strategically lazy man, by stepping back, by refusing to waste himself in the collective treadmill, does something radical. He confronts that emptiness head-on. He has the courage to sit in silence, to be idle in the eyes of others, until he discovers what truly matters to him. And once a man finds that center, once he knows his real purpose, his every action gains a weight that ordinary busyness can never match. His one deliberate step is stronger than 1,000 frantic motions. His decision carries authority because it comes not from exhaustion or desperation, but from clarity. That is why society resents him, because he proves that most of us are not working. We're just running. We run from silence, from uncertainty, from the terror of facing ourselves. We would rather collapse in exhaustion than sit still and ask, what am I actually doing with my life? The strategically lazy man forces that question. His calmness humiliates our chaos. His restraint makes our panic look small. His focus makes our busyness look meaningless. And so we label him a threat, when in reality, he is a mirror. Here's the truth. Society doesn't really want individuals. It wants workers, followers, consumers. But Jung insisted that the real task of life is individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the herd. The strategically lazy man is closer to that goal than the endlessly busy one, because he refuses to sell his soul for approval. He saves himself for what matters. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in all this. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be valuable. You don't have to grind yourself into dust to deserve respect. What you need is clarity. What you need is courage. What you need is the patience to wait until your actions actually mean something. Because in the end, the greatest tragedy isn't being called lazy. The greatest tragedy is living your whole life in motion, yet never moving toward yourself